Hello, my name is Alana Shupe, and I will be presenting the 11 standards for professional learning. There's a total of 11 standards over 3 categories. Category 1 is rigorous content for each learner, so what that we are learning. Category 2 is transformational processes, so how educators learn. And the third is conditions for success, the different types of things that impact what we are learning and how we are learning. Standard 1, focusing on the category of rigor, is focusing on learning practices. So professional learning results in excellent outcomes for all students when educators understand students' historical and societal contexts. So as educators, we want to get to know who our students are, their local history, and the greater global impacts, but also individually what their home lives are like, what their home languages are. Educators want to embrace students' assets through instruction. We need to be focusing on what they are bringing to the table instead of focusing on perceived deficiencies. And we want to personalize their learning to lean into student skills. Educators want to foster relationships with students by actively listening to them. We want to choose level appropriate resources that will pique students' interest and lean into their actual lives. Standard 2 is focusing on curriculum assessment and instruction. So educators want to prioritize high quality curriculum and instructional materials for students. We will advocate for high quality curriculum and materials, and we will build other capacity to use such materials as well. We want to assess student learning to advance progress. So we will use a variety of formative and summative assessments that are tightly bound to that curriculum and build educators' capacity to assess students' progress and students' needs based on these high quality assessments. Finally, we want to understand curriculum and implement through instruction, understanding the scope and sequence. So not only what happens throughout a year within the curriculum, but what students are bringing from past curriculum and where they are going for future. Standard 3 and the final standard under rigor is professional expertise. Professional learning results in excellent outcomes for all students when educators apply standards and research to their work. So educators fully immerse themselves in staying up to date on the most recent research-based practices and techniques that aid student success. They stay up on changes to curriculum and work collaboratively in knowing how this change is going to impact students so that there are not gaps in the moving from old curriculum to new curriculum. Educators develop the expertise essential to their roles. This expertise includes content knowledge. So, for example, um, knowing knowing the content of physical science, pedagogical knowledge, knowing how to teach to students, and then content pedagogical knowledge, which is knowing how to teach specifically a physical science standard to a student. Finally, educators prioritize coherence and alignment in their learning. Educators need to balance individual and collective needs, working collaboratively with colleagues to ensure that all the practice aligns within the school and the system level curriculum, um, and aligns well with the strategic plan. So we are following along with our end goals. Moving into the category of transformational, how we teach. Standard 4 is learning drivers. Professional learning results in excellent outcomes for all students when educators prioritize the learning needs of all students and educators. So, in understanding all students and adults come to the table with unique perspectives, levels of comfort, and backgrounds. As educators, we need to examine our own practices and how our own practices contribute or don't contribute to the fulfillment of the vision. Educators want to identify and address their own perspectives and beliefs. So reflect on your own background, your own mindset, your own practices. Engage in open and respectful dialogue with colleagues and peers that encourages reflection. And educators collaborate with colleagues who hold various perspectives. We know that responsive and supportive relationships among educators creates an environment that makes collaboration possible. So, as professional educators, we want to take our colleagues' personal perspectives and experiences into consideration in how we interact. Standard 5 is evidence. Professional learning results in excellent outcomes for all students when educators create expectations and build capacity for use of evidence. So, professional learning is guided by valid, reliable evidence and supported by transparent expectations for how data will be used. Staff needs to be trained in how to collect, analyze, and apply that meaningful data. Um, Educators leverage evidence, data, and research from multiple sources to plan educator learning. So this would involve using quantitative, qualitative, formative, and summative data to decide and identify needs. Again, consulting research and multiple levels of evidence to ensure that all learning that is happening is evidence-based, contextually relevant, and strategically aligned with available resources. Educators measure and report the impact of professional learning. So we would establish clear goals and benchmarks and evaluation plans before we implement. Before we ever get started, we know the process that we are using. This uses evidence to monitor progress and make adjustments. Standard 6 is learning designs. So educators set relevant and contextualized learning goals. We begin by defining specific learning challenges and articulating the expected paths to achieve desired outcomes. Goals are achieved, or goals should be achievable, specific, and time bound. Educators will set the groundwork in research and theories about learning, understanding how students and adults learn and align instruction to that. We should balance rigorous content with active engagement and scaffold their learning to make sure that everything is, while being challenging, is also attainable. Finally, we implement evidence-based learning designs. We want to utilize current research to adapt to learners' contexts as learners' contexts and needs evolve. We will select from numerous learning designs, including different processes such as book studies, co-teaching, expert coaching, mentoring, non-evaluative peer observation. So we're using all of the tools in our toolkit. Standard 7 is implementation, understanding and applying research on change management. We understand that change is complex, multifaceted process that requires effort over time. Change can be accelerated if we have clearly communicated the vision and the reason for the change. We want to identify potential structural and policies that will end up being barriers for our end goal. Educators engage in feedback processes. We understand that feedback is a vital part of this process and necessary to change. Not only does it help us improve our processes, but it improves culture and builds trust among educators. Finally, we implement and sustain professional learning. This will require multiple cycles of practice, reflection, and adjustment, as well as supportive structures to assist teachers through this change. Standard 8 is the first standard in the category of conditions for success, and we are looking at learning foundations. Professional learning results in excellent outcomes for all students when educators establish expectations that everyone will learn. We want to actively remove barriers to learning and achievement. We will apply knowledge to make sure our structures, policies, and norms do not serve as barriers to students. We create structures to ensure access to learning. So these structures include things such as HR policies and practices, resource allocation, how we use our data, and how we make our decisions. All of these things should be meaningful and relevant. We also sustain a culture of support for all staff. We prioritize trust and examine how ourselves and our peers' actions establish or diminish trust. Standard 9 is a culture of collaborative inquiry. Professional learning results in excellent outcomes for all students when educators engage in continuous improvement. We should be developing shared goals and then documenting, analyzing collaboratively, and working on ways to improve our practices. This should be a cycle of planning, learning, testing, data collection, and analysis that we just go through over and over. We build collaboration skills and capacity, knowing that collaboration varies by our role. If we are a school-based educator, we can participate in collaborative inquiry teams and assess instructional strategies to meet goals. If we are a school or district leader, we want to collaborate in networks that analyze our collective efforts. We share responsibility for improving learning for all students. Educators observe and are observed by peers to find opportunities to learn from each other. Standard 10 is leadership. Professional learning results in excellent outcomes for all students when we establish a compelling vision for professional learning. This vision includes a commitment to use formative and summative data to inform a comprehensive, collaborative, and differentiated professional learning system that is laid out with clear expectations. We want to sustain coherent support to build educator capacity. This is by prioritizing procedures that support individual and collective capacity and skill building. Also thinking about how we are allocating our resources that will get the biggest bang for our buck. We advocate for professional learning by sharing the importance and evidence of impact of professional learning. So part of that is also sharing how we are doing professional learning ourselves and how we put that to use. Finally, for standard 11, we want to really pay attention to our resources. We allocate resources for professional learning. We would want to determine what expertise is needed, and through the hiring process, we identify experts that we can bring onto our team to help with that. We want to prioritize all learners in their resource decisions. So don't forget about your outlier students. What do they need to be successful? And monitor the use and impact of resource investments. If you are putting your funding and your time into a material, you should be getting gains back from that. And if you are not, you need to be willing to let that go. All right, thank you so much for viewing my project. This came from Learning Forward, the Professional Learning Association. I hope you have a wonderful day.